Alright, so fellas, I know not everybody could make it, but I'm sure everybody's going to be viewing this on YouTube if I can get this recorded correctly as well. I'm glad everybody who is here could make it. Zoso, it's a great honor, as always. SJ2, you're from Budokai. I know it's a completely different world, but if there's anything that I could stress about how we move forward is this isn't about Budokai versus Tenkaichi. It's not about Tenkaichi of Europe versus South America or United States, Canada, whatever. It's not even about new Tenkaichi versus old Tenkaichi. This is just about caring about the evolution of Tenkaichi, the evolution of gaming in general. I mean, you guys, I brought you here because you're either the influencers, you're the ones that care, you're the best of the best, and I can't think of anybody else that I would rather have here, so I appreciate you guys making it. Yeah. At the end of the presentation, I do expect that each of you will at least see a new direction of Tenkaichi, and how intense things can potentially get. And those that don't play Tenkaichi, I know you can at least appreciate what we're doing here, and I hope you still enjoy the show. People outside the community, as you already know, see Tenkaichi as fairly straightforward. Tenkaichi is Tenkaichi, lacks depth, and who cares about it because it's not Street Fighter. A lot of Budokai players feel the same way. They kind of feel left out, but anybody who actually plays these games, they can fill any amount of time getting into the differences of Tenkaichi games, but for the sake of the presentation, I'll stick to the similarities, specifically with Tenkaichi 2 and Tenkaichi 3. Understanding the laws of focal adherence, we know that character position defines our options. For example, as you can see on the top, attempting to dash or move vertically within the step-in barrier results with side and vertical steps, but as you can see below, you've got your dashing, you've got your vertical movement unhindered. I also wanted to talk about cancellation a little bit, specifically here with the dash. There's all kinds of cancels in Budokai, and there's all kinds of cancels in Tenkaichi. Here, movement is a very important aspect of combat, and you'll see at the top, if you try to stop a dash with another dash, you'll activate somewhat of a dash termination animation here, as opposed to the bottom where it activates a slide and your character is immediately transitioned into combat ready stance. Here you can dash at your opponent and breach the step-in barrier and then slide backwards far beyond the barrier for super blast positioning. You can dash to the side and then slide back in the opposite direction if you like. You can dash at your opponent and slide to his flank for the unguarded offense. All of this has been a part of Tenkaichi meta for many years. I expect everybody here kind of knows what that's about. But as far as the step-in barrier itself is concerned, there has been at least one loophole within the step-in barrier that, while aerial positioning adheres to the limitations of the barrier, a grounded character of equal distance is afforded jump activation. This has been over a decade now when Zoso discovered that you can dash out of jump animation even within the step-in barrier. And by reducing the number of frames between the jump and the dash to a single frame, we have the Enigma Dash. The Enigma Dash is both considered an aerial dash and a grounded dash. The former because you can cancel with descend, and grounded because you can jump out of dash animation. As you can see above, with the Enigma Dash cancellations comes all the related slide executions, the slide extensions, and as seen below with subsequent jump executions, one can link dashes as he or she sees fit. Just keep in mind that each linked dash requires frame perfect execution. Now at this point, I should make it known that I'm not really well versed in Tenkaichi 3. I haven't played it in years. This is kind of where you guys come into play. So my knowledge is very limited. I've brought many of you here, so once you can see how this new way of Tenkaichi is being applied with Tenkaichi 2, maybe you can apply it to the theories of Tenkaichi 3. Maybe it works. If it doesn't, maybe it opens your eyes to other things. But as I move forward, is anyone here familiar with APM?
Sounds familiar.
Uh,
Is
It's
it StarCraft related?
APM, it's action per minute, right?
Actions per minute. Exactly. Actions per minute. Stands for actions per minute, or in simpler terms, buttons pressed per minute, as it pertains to fighting games or just about any kind of game. In the StarCraft community, top level players hold an expectation for APM levels of 400 to 600. Understand that StarCraft is not a fighting game. It's a strategy game. Movement is free. You have free space, multiple units to select, multiple skills and options, with equipment built to handle this type of gameplay. In this type of game, APM is far more relevant in terms of what constitutes a top-level player. The world record for APM is noted as a StarCraft player pulling an APM of 818, but I do want to make it clear. APM is not always a clear indication of a top-level player. Remember, Tenkaichi is a fighting game, and as such, different factors must be considered. In a fighting game, a player can be aggressive and push the offense, or a player can be reserved and hold the defense. Any tactics can change from second to second. In fighting games, I've always believed that knowledge surpasses all. Knowledge of the game's mechanics, the meta, and just anything that you would know versus the opponent. But also proper execution is an absolute must. Offense, defense, but also arguably most important, movement. In traditional fighting games, one might expect to see top-level APM never breaching 200. This is expected because the movement is severely limited, and so is the space of the stage.
So with Tekken 5, I wouldn't really say much of a traditional because I believe that Tekken, unlike the other two fighters, have a lot more APM since you apply a lot more movement compared to the two. You have wave dashing and Korean backdashing, etc.
Yes, you are right. And that's actually where I move on to Super Smash Bros. Melee, where you'll see top-level APM for Super Smash Bros. Melee going over 300. We see that the space of the stage is limited, but the freedom of movement a player has is a major factor. So essentially what we've learned as time goes on with fighting games, it seems the more movement that they have, the more options available, in which case APMs may skyrocket. With proper execution of the Enigma Dash, Tenkaichi 2 is awarded free movement with a much larger stage. Top level APM hits over 1000. But there's a couple of problems that come with this, and that is mental and physical fatigue. As many of you know, the brain produces electrical impulses that transmit to all parts of the body, in this case, to the trigger finger and the thumb. 2 electrical impulses while trying to time them to a single frame of execution. Increasing the output to over 1000 APM through maintaining frame-perfect execution becomes insanely difficult. The more we push the output, the higher the risk of losing control. Just as is true in any fighting game, a single tech flub can come at a major cost. So here's where things change. Gentlemen, I present the solution. On the left, we have the default turtle configuration. This is how everybody learns to play Tenkaichi. This is by default the same in Tenkaichi 2 as it is with Tenkaichi 3. On the right, I present the Sonic configuration. A while back, a player named Acrilycz, and I wish he was here, but I tried to get him. He thought it was wise to switch the guard to L1 because unlike Tenkaichi 3, Tenkaichi 2 has guard cancels, same like what you would find in Budokai 3. As such, he found optimal to use the same method for Tenkaichi 2's guard cancels by switching the cancel button to a trigger. Here, the button configuration maintains the trigger cancel method, but instead of L1 as Acrilycz would have it, we place the guard to R1. What was once a guard, we now move to a dash button. What was once the dash button will now be the jump and ascension button. This all may seem very uncomfortable, especially knowing these games have been out since the mid-2000s, but understand, I have now changed a technique from what was once 2 electrical impulses to a single impulse. The swipe. Now, swiping the thumb from one button to the next will, as you know, cause damage to the skin. So I do recommend getting thumb sleeves. taking a look here, the swipe is easy, it's fast, and with the sleeves, the only damage you'll need to consider is joint pain.
Next level Tenkaichi.
Yeah, I actually have something. If you know about Super Dragon Ball Z, the scene of it, there's a tech called fly canceling, and the inputs are similar to this X and circle. So a lot of people do this method. So
exactly. Looking at this new speed, Tenkaichi movement skyrockets. And it's hard to tell here, but Goku is trying to hit me.
So,
Go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but all the inputs would be just R1 and X over and over.
R1 and X in whatever direction you're trying to put your character. Now it's a swipe. It's changing from 2 buttons trying to maintain that single frame button execution to 1. And it's all based on 1 movement and the speed that you do it.
it can also be denoted that I've noticed that even if I press R1 and X both, sometimes it'll pull out the Enigma Dash. So theoretically, you could press X and circle at the same time with your thumb instead, but that's just might not work.
Well, it might. You have to give it a shot. So, here you can see other applications of how this speed and technique can be implemented into gameplay. On the left, you can now, depending on the dash and the placement, you can outrun the rush attack. Approaches are completely different. You can outrun the Hell's Storm. And let you hear what it's actually like when you actually hear what's going on. So, gentlemen, I've effectively made Tenkaichi the fastest fighting game in the world.
Hopefully.
I need an applause sound effect. Where is it?
There's no applause.
I got it.
There's no applause. This is just.
There we go.
Oh, thank you, sir. But really, this is for you guys to take home, do whatever you want. You can choose to ignore it. I mean, this is a button configuration change, and that's very uncomfortable. But once you get it down, it's not really all that different than a lot of other games out there. There's, for example, Halo. The X button is jump. The circle button is dash. There's all kinds of fighting games, for example, Budokai, where the R button is used for guard cancellation, so it takes a little bit of an adjustment, but once it's down, you're able to move now in ways that no one else can. So if you ever come across somebody else who is boasting their greatness in Tenkaichi, but they don't know about this, and they're confused why you're changing your button configuration, they're in for a world of hurting. Tenkaichi is all about position.
That's very true.
Well, I would like to add that on traditional fighting games, it's a lot more common for players to change their configuration. But I think it's mostly because all the buttons have the same hierarchy, in the sense that when do you use the lock-on button on Tenkaichi? Once every fight, if you're lucky. But on other traditional games, on the L1 button, for example, you can have the heavy punch or heavy kick, which is almost as important as the light attack. So I guess in that sense, nobody ever thought about changing the button configuration before Acrilycz because it was not really necessary. You had the 4 main buttons on the face of the controller, basically, and there was no point in changing them.
Yes,
So,
by default, it already showed up exactly what you needed it to do.
Yeah.
Tenkaichi, no one ever thought to change the button configuration for Tenkaichi because, again, based on how the game was supposed to be played, everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. It's only when we start dealing with these new exploits, again, Zoso, you helped find stuff like this. So now we're playing in ways, I mean, we've been playing in ways that the creators never expected us to play. But here we found a reason to change the button configuration to play well beyond even our own expectations.
Sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, pretty neat.
Except I use keyboard.
Oh, you can get
Don't
out of
break
here.
down
Get
your
right on
own.
out.
This man is one of the best NA